Welcome, welcome, everybody. Thanks for downloading another episode of Wigs for Wigs. Here we are on episode 2 of season 3. I'm Joe Cook, once again joined by Bill Venezia. There's been so much going on over these last few months that we just couldn't wait to kick off another episode. So you're getting a little bit of a double treat here this first week of season 3, and we'll see how it develops throughout the year. But Bill, how you doing today?
Good, Joe. Good, Joe. Again, like the other day, not a lot going on. Actually, there is.
Just yesterday it was insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
we're recording this on November 15th for anybody who might download this in the future. It's November 15th, 2023. And some bizarre things have been happening.
Well, fortunately, the good news, bad news is that at least we've settled for 2 months into to January. This debt issue,
I assume the Senate will pass this continuing resolution.
Oh, they will. In fact, I don't understand why the Senate doesn't take the bull by the horns and basically pass a resolution that would fund the border, fund Israel, and fund Ukraine, and then send it down to the Congress, because
the House would reject it probably.
Well, the House, I don't think the House would reject it. I don't think so. When you have 120 some odd Republicans voting to pass the resolution yesterday, you had 93, I think, voted against it. I don't know if the Speaker of the House has the goddess, let's put it that way, or the backbone to basically put the bill up for a vote, because I think in the back of his mind, he's thinking what's lurking there is Gates and everybody else. They'll just do away with him like they did away with the other guy, but let's see what happens. But I think that the Senate, which is a different mentality, should take the bull by the horns and do that.
The Senate is supposed to be the more mature, more intellectual body. And yet yesterday,
yes,
this senator from Oklahoma, who, I'll be honest, I never heard of him before. I thought I knew all the members of the Senate. I never heard his name before. So I have to look into when he even became a senator, this guy.
Joe, you know what his credentials are? He's a former MMA fighter.
Oh, is he?
That's what he is. That's I didn't know anything about him.
Well, that makes sense considering what played out yesterday then.
Absolutely ridiculous. Hey, Bernie did a good job there.
The head of the Teamsters Union was testifying at a economic and educational and some mishmash committee of the Senate, and he challenged him to a fight and got up to go fight him.
Yeah,
are you kidding me?
I did notice one thing. When he got up, it took him a while to stand up. I mean, because he's a big man. I think the guy is very happy that Bernie intervened, because that could have been ugly.
This is the United States Senate, really?
Yeah, I mean, you can't make it up.
I kind of expect some of that nonsense every once in a while in the House. The House is supposed to be more representative of the regular people of America, but the Senate is supposed to be something higher. This guy's a U.S. senator.
Oh, you mean like what McCarthy did to that congressman from Tennessee, elbowing him in the back while he's being interviewed. Then he said, if I would have elbowed him, he would have known it, or something like, if I hit him, he would have felt it. Oh my God.
But again, that's the House. The House is out of control. We know that, but we're supposed to hold the Senate to a higher expectation.
Absolutely.
And this is just nonsense. This guy from Oklahoma, whatever his name is, I'll look it up, but I can't remember his name.
What impact on the voters does this have? I mean, the total.
I think some people love it.
You know what? It is sad that it's devolved into reality TV, and because that's what it is. And it's when Trump was running in 2016, how he would say that beat the crap out of the people from the press, or that they were the enemy of the people, or if hecklers heckled, in the old days. Trump never punched anybody in his life.
No.
And the sad fact of the matter is no one's ever punched him. It's always those guys that basically aren't tough that talk the toughest.
Well, it's funny when I teach in U.S. history too, when we come to 1968, chaotic year.
Yeah.
And I play clips of George Wallace running for president that year. It sounds an awful lot like what Trump says, or at least that he did, that, we should knock the crap out of you guys. And, all you hippies, we're going to hit you with your own sandals and stuff like that. There's a lot of echoes of, obviously I'm not breaking any news here. There's a lot of echoes of George Wallace in Donald Trump.
Yeah, but George Wallace, I'm not so sure George Wallace was as unhinged as Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think it was more calculated by George Wallace.
I think so. I think he was.
He was smarter than Donald Trump. I think.
Well, two politicians.
Trump gets that it works for him, and it does. But I think, generally speaking, George Wallace was a smarter man than Donald Trump is.
Yeah, he just happened to be.
Some of it is just lack of impulse control for Donald Trump.
But Wallace was a dyed-in-the-wool segregationist. Period. A product of that time, and segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever.
Tomorrow, segregation forever. That was only a few years before Donald Trump and his father were fined millions of dollars by the Nixon Justice Department for discriminating against Black tenants in their apartment buildings.
There's a middle-class apartment buildings in Queens. That's where Trump Sr. made his money.
Yeah.
He did I guess it would be akin to what would be affordable housing today.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's been echoes of other even more disturbing figures, if you could imagine, more disturbing than echoing George Wallace in 2023. Donald Trump, in his speech the other day, referred to his political opponents as vermin.
Yep.
And I happened to get in this morning and I had your postcard that you sent. You were quicker getting back from Germany than the mail was. But vermin, that's an echo of somebody from the past talking about political opponents.
Absolutely. I visited his place, up in the Bavarian Alps. It conjures sadly horrible things that an American politician would basically use the verbiage of Adolf Hitler. But it's more than a dog whistle. It's a call to arms to those people, because I don't know if you caught the Steve Bannon interview by Jonathan Karl. I caught clips of it.
Jonathan Karl, the ABC reporter who has a new book coming out.
Yes. Yes. One of the sad things is that it's unabashed with regard to when we get in, he's telling Jonathan Karl, when we get in, it'll be the biggest mass deportation of people in the United States. We intend to
about camps and
camps and 10 million people to be deported. Now, included in that, I'm sure, is the press. You were talking about defunding any news outlet that basically is anti what they're doing. It's kind of sad. Trump further with the vermin comment, how vilifying his opponents as communists, as atheists. I
like that he called them communists and fascists.
You got communists and fascists. He doesn't know the difference.
Those are complete polar opposites.
Yeah. It was, you can't find that rhetoric in the former Soviet Union with Stalin. Stalin was more stealthy about it, and just all of a sudden people disappeared, but who's to say that wouldn't happen?
Trump, Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller's dream.
Yeah. The sad part is they're overt about it. When Trump was questioned about some of this shit, and pardon my French, I'm sorry that I use that word, but it is.
Okay.
He basically would say the typical thing is that he would say basically that people are saying, that's his fallback when he wants. He's softening a position on abortion. Here's the guy who bragged that he was going to be the one to get rid of Roe, and he did. and now he sees that that's not a politically tenable position.
Well, I mean, who knows what he really believes in any of that? Because if you read Bob Woodward's first book about his presidency, it was Steve Bannon in one of his first meetings with Trump, who asked what his opinion on abortion was, and Trump said, "I'm pro-life. I mean, I'm pro-choice, of course." And Stephen Bannon said, "No, you're pro-life. You're pro-life, and that's what we're going to ride to get elected. Is that you're pro-life?" So,
The
who
other
knows
thing,
if Trump even knows the difference between those two terms, but
well, the other playback, right from the playbook that was expounded on by Bannon was that all the people who were involved in committing crimes against democracy on January 6th would be pardoned, and let out of prison. It's like opening up the jails. I mean, and it's.
well,
I mean, I hope that people are paying
things,
attention to this.
these things were Trump and Bannon and Miller's plan for the first term too. But
Right.
we had people in positions who stopped them from being able to do some of these things. You had people like, I mean, even people that aren't going to go down in the history books as profiles in courage, but people like Rex Tillerson and General Mattis, General Kelly,
Even Priebus's first.
Frank Priebus, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there
who
were
understood how the functions of government work better than Donald Trump and some of his devils on his shoulder understood that stuff and were able to throw some gears in the wheels of what they were trying to do. I don't know if those people will be there in a second.
No, it won't be, because you're going to have to sign a loyalty oath.
The Heritage Foundation is already scouting people on behalf of Trump to serve in a second term, and part of it is essentially a loyalty oath.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, it's shame on the Heritage Foundation, because the Heritage Foundation is
a respectable conservative organization, but
yes, with that allegedly valued democracy, albeit I guess they've thrown that to the wind. Interesting part was that in the first administration, the reason Bannon was canned and thrown out, two reasons. One, he was taking all of the credit for Trump's victory, which offended Trump's little ego. And the other one was he was going at odds with his son-in-law, Jared, who wanted him out, and they basically almost physically came to blows in the White House. So
somebody who actually is Jewish might not get along with Steve Bannon for some reason.
Imagine that, the most despicable man. Bannon's going to be in jail by the time the election comes around. You understand that? He will definitely
already, but they're letting him stay out on appeal.
Yeah, I mean,
he was found guilty. He was convicted.
He was convicted, and he should be in jail. I mean, he's the visage of him is as despicable as what comes out of his mouth. This horrible little man, who, to me is a disgrace to American democracy.
I want to talk more about Trump's vermin comment, because I think it's so significant. I think it's worthwhile spending more time on it. He's used derogatory language for his opponents before. That's not surprising, really. I'm a old John McCain Republican, so I'm the scum of the earth, he said in one speech several years ago, and I'm proud to be the scum of the earth in that way. But vermin has a different connotation, right? There's saying negative things about your opponents, and that happens. There's mudslinging in politics, but using that specific term has very specific historical background and specific connotations to it. And I'm just holding the book here, right? I know.
Thank God that we're in New Jersey anyway. That book isn't banned.
Yeah, so I'm holding up Mouse by Art Spiegelman for our listeners, which is a superb book. It's a graphic novel history of the Holocaust, where the Jews are portrayed as mice, the Nazis are portrayed as cats, the collaborators with the Nazis are portrayed as pigs. All different animals are used to portray, and then dogs represent the Americans who chased off the cats and saved the mice. But yeah, it is on a banned books list among some of these.
I don't think you could. Florida, it's gone.
But vermin. It's he's basically calling people rats and that they should be snuffed out the way the Nazis did. And just talk more about why that matters, right? What are his supporters? We already know who take him literally when he says things going to take from this.
I think
you may have frozen, Bill.
like that you're Joe, we're breaking up just slightly.
Yeah, so let's just
and
try that again. Let's just try answer again, hopefully. So I'd ask, why does it matter?
I think that we have to basically shine a light on this. The media has to shine a light on this all the time, or all is lost. I also believe that schools have a responsibility to alert the kids to this. And I don't think we have to be partisan with regard to Democrat.
That was going to be my follow-up question to that part was.
I personally, and what I wanted to talk to you about off camera is I'd like to get involved with like another school, and I have an idea for this, to basically get kids to basically get the vote out among themselves. 18-year-olds need to be able to vote, and they need to vote, and they need to get involved, especially in this election and why it's so important and what it means to their future. Yeah. They're going to inherit this mess that sadly we've created for them. And I do think that the forces of light have to be mustered. I think they're going to come from the young. I think they're going to come from 18 to 22-year-olds.
How do we deal with, you mentioned, that schools have an obligation to point these things out. How do we then deal with, okay, I point out that these comments are anti-Semitic, which they are, that they're anti-democratic, which they are. How do we deal with then the random parent who comes in and says, you're indoctrinating my child?
Well, there's a way to do that. And what I'm suggesting is that, we're not saying you can lead a horse to water. What I'm saying is that we need to basically tell them that in a vibrant democracy, voting matters, that you need to get out and vote. We can do that in a nonpartisan way.
Yeah, certainly that part.
Yeah, and I think that that's what needs to basically, to avert the backlash among some parents that schools are basically indoctrinating them or quote unquote grooming their children, then what's wrong with voting? We don't have to tell them who to vote for, but we can talk to them about the issues in the election and what's important and why it's important for them to get involved and getting their friends to vote. And I think that if we do that, we'll be in decent stead. I mean, we're going to be in decent stead in New Jersey, number one, but around this country. And that's where technology helps to link in. If we can link into a greater organization to get 18-year-olds to vote, they can be pivotal in this election. Yeah. And again, we do not.
We've seen that most recent poll that has a lot of Democrats freaking out where Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden. It's because Biden's support is down in that poll among 18 to 25-year-olds.
Yep. But you know what? In a way, if we encourage a dialogue with kids about voting and let the dialogue come from them, I think that basically we'll be above the fray with regard to injecting politics in it, because our message and our objective is to get more 18-year-olds to vote, as opposed to Ramaswamy, who wants to increase the voting age to 25. With that specific mindset, it's if you can't win by the rules that are established, so change the rules. I mean, it's just like basically shortening the goalposts. So.
Anybody want to ask Vivek Ramaswamy why he knows that Nikki Haley's daughter has a TikTok account?
I guess he spends a lot of time on TikTok. Plain and simple. I mean, I don't even know what TikTok is, to be truthful with you. And I am just thankful that I'm of a generation that didn't have to deal with the trials and tribulations of social media.
There was
I
pretty much
got-
only Facebook when I was in high school, college. So
I, uh,
and it was only for college students at that time, Facebook. You had to have a college.edu email address to join. So it wasn't the behemoth that it is today. So, but yeah,
my,
it's
my wife belongs now. My wife is a little older than me. My wife is on Facebook, but she's on a couple of sites. One, a Jersey City site about old time Jersey City. Her family is from San Lupo, Italy. And it seems that there's a San Lupe society in still in existence that her parents and uncles, we still celebrate the Feast of San Lupo, which is the last Saturday in July, in a bilingual Italian and English mass, which goes on interminably because they do everything in Italian and English. But the interesting part is a lot of the San Lupe's people who immigrated from Italy, that not only did they come to the United States, they went to Australia. So now there's a whole site from Australia and they do recipes, which I find so interesting because they have Italian and Australian accents, and actually they do the same recipes that my wife's
about the bar.
I think they might make kangaroo parmesan too. I'm not sure. But
yeah, certainly encouraging voting among young people is important. I have voter registration forms in my classroom for the kids. They wanted to register to vote. But I
yeah,
just think back, like, I know we've talked about this before, what the first elections we voted in were. I mean, mine was 2008, John McCain, Barack Obama.
well, Joe, mine was 1972, Nixon, McGovern.
Yep.
I got out of the hospital. I was in for 8 days with total knee reconstruction. And I was dressed and ready to go at 6 o'clock. I couldn't wait. This is the first time I'm going to vote. So the nurses come into the room to give me breakfast. And the one head nurse said, "You're all dressed. What do you want to get out of here?" I said, "Yeah, it's election day. I have to go vote early and often." So she said,
Not often enough for McGovern.
She said, who are you voting for? I said, "George McGovern." She said, "We're keeping you in another day." Oh, God.
So really, looking back at those elections, I mean, I know every time election time comes around, we feel like it's the end of the world. But the stakes, looking back at those, don't nearly seem as high as the stakes in elections of more recent days. Like, we seem kind of naive to look back and say, "Oh, the stakes are so high about whether Barack Obama or John McCain won, or Richard Nixon or George McGovern won."
Yeah, you know what?
The future of democracy did not seem at stake in those elections.
No, because there were institutions and institutional guardrails that were intact, and those Republicans understood that. I'm going to tell you the truth. If in fact, I mean, I was obviously for Obama, but if Romney was elected president, I believe to this day he's a good man. He would have had a moral compass. He would have done the right thing. I don't know if the working class would have benefited as much, but the truth of the matter,
there would have been consequences to the election. I'm not saying,
but he was an honest guy, and I would trust the presidency in his hands.
I'm not saying history would have played out 100% the same with these different.
If John McCain was elected, I wouldn't. I would have been disappointed. But the truth of the matter is, America would have been in good stead. You know what I mean? And it's kind of sad. I tell you a funny story. My father and mother were ardent FDR, basically New Deal people. My father has never voted for a Republican. Well, they never voted for a Republican. He's deceased, but he never voted for a Republican in his life. One summer, my mother brought home from the supermarket. It was we were gonna have a barbecue. Bush's baked beans. He told her to bring it back to the supermarket. I want nothing to do with that family. Herbert Walker Bush was president. Get that out of my house. That's what he told my mother. You can't even make that up. I mean, that's how dogmatic.
That horrible Republican tyrant, George Herbert Walker Bush.
Can you imagine that? My father's hero was Harry Truman. Maybe because, like my dad, he went to high school, never went to college, but he really liked Harry Truman. Harry Truman, did a good job as president.
Yeah, I mean, Harry Truman's a top 5, 7 presidents.
Yeah. And like Biden, to a certain degree, had no idea what he was stepping into because FDR never basically kept him in the loop.
No, which was not unusual for vice presidents of that era either.
Yeah, I think
I think in recent times we've been so conditioned to think of vice presidents as being more powerful than they are because we all lived through the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney years, where Cheney
Yes.
have a lot of influence.
Obama empowered Biden. And
Obama empowered Biden to a certain extent with certain issues, but
and he doesn't empower his vice president at all. And maybe that's a little part of the problem.
probably positive because, but I think we've all been conditioned the last 20, 25 years to think of vice presidents as being more powerful than they really are historically. It's more common in history for vice presidents to be out in the dark and have no idea what's going on than to be intimately involved in what's happening.
So you subscribe to John Nance Gardner, the vice presidency isn't worth of one bucket of spit.
Or the very first vice president, John Adams, who said it was the most meaningless position ever dreamed up by the minds of men. I think it was George Herbert Walker Bush who said as vice president, his job was mainly to go to funerals.
Well, with either
Trump, go to things that the president didn't want to go to.
If it's either Trump or Biden, the vice presidency means an awful lot.
Yeah.
Given their age. I mean,
well, right. And that part of what hurt my hero, John McCain, was the Sarah Palin factor. But again, that was coming after 8 years of the vice president having a lot of power and people really looking at the vice president pick that year in a way I don't know if more people would have necessarily done.
Joe, you had a clip the other day that you showed with Nicole Wallace.
Yeah.
It's ironic you bring that up because she was entrusted with bringing Sarah Palin up to snuff on issues and to almost be her handler.
Yep. The movie Game Change does a great job of showing that.
She basically was banished from the McCain sphere of influence, wasn't even invited to his funeral. You know, it was kind of sad. I mean, she was an ardent supporter, but she got blamed by his handlers for not doing enough to basically getting Sarah Palin up to snuff, which was an impossible task. Yeah. You could not fill that void between
name a newspaper you read, and she couldn't name a newspaper.
No.
Couldn't name a Supreme Court case. I mean,
see now, if Trump's looking for a list of vice presidential candidates, you know, besides the one in Arizona, why not resurrect Palin? But I think Palin's time has come and went. She's done.
Yeah, you don't even see her ever.
She lives most of her life in Arizona anyway now. So she's, maybe she's going to run for senator there.
Well, how ironic would that be? Sarah Palin running for John McCain's old seat.
Isn't that he'd be spinning in his grave, not rolling in his grave.
Well, he got a good laugh when Carrie Lake lost last year.
So Joe, I think we've covered some sad topics of the day. I mean, I hope to have, to get us, Eddie DeFazio, who's willing to come on and talk about all the legal issues, because obviously as they come to pass, as they come to fruition, I gotta feel that they're going to basically impact Trump's candidacy.
Well, they have to, if in no other way that he's going to be required to be sitting in the courtroom every day for these trials.
You know what, though?
Not optional in a criminal case.
In a way, I liken that to basically the pandemic's effect on the 2020 race.
Yeah,
where he even couldn't do rallies. Biden didn't go out. Most of the stuff was done online. I think it's somehow benefiting Trump that, number one, he's not on the debate stage.
Yeah.
Number two, he's not really out on the campaign trail. You know what I mean? And I don't know if I think that has impacted, some of the polling. I think
I don't think you can believe polling this far out from the election.
No.
Even though they're both known quantities, people aren't serious about the election at this point. Many people.
No, I think not. And one of the positive signs I think for Biden is that, I look at the gas pump. I was on Route 22. I had to take my car into.
I was just going to say the same thing. I paid $3.07 per
Yeah.
gallon this morning.
Well, on Route 22 in North Plainfield, New Jersey, I saw multiple gas stations for $2.99.
Yeah,
And I think that's a good thing.
I think
it's,
that's the best thing that could happen for Joe Biden is
Yep.
those gas
You know,
prices go down.
it's funny. The economy is even with, well, inflation is down, but that's number one. Number two, the perception is that, it's got to be changed. And that's got to be done by the campaign of Biden to basically get that out there.
Because I think a lot of people who are saying right now that they would vote for Trump are saying the economy was better under Trump. Like there's that just mindset that we were spending less money when Trump was president than we are now. So if those gas prices can continue to go down, and if inflation can continue to go down, and that perception can be combated effectively, I think it's not going to be all that scary come election day that Trump might win. I think the numbers will shift back to Joe Biden.
Well, from your mouth to God's ear, because I do think that this is and I said this about the 2020 campaign. This is the most consequential election in our lifetime. Plain and simple. I can't see. I know it's not going to do my heart any good if there's one subsequent to this in 2020, in 2028. That's as consequential. But at least you can say in 2028, after this is over, it'll definitely be let loose upon the younger candidates. It'll be interesting to see, what'll happen after this. But let's not even get that far.
All right, Bill. So we're just about out of time here. What's your one most important takeaway our listeners should take from our discussion today and what's going on?
Well, I think that two things. One, everybody needs to pay close attention. I think you can't become desensitized to what Trump's rhetoric is. And I think people of goodwill, people specifically in suburban areas, have to think about, do they want this to return, this monster, plain and simple. And secondly, I think you and I can do something positive in terms of mobilizing 18-year-olds and 18-year-olds, because they're the ones that can manipulate social media to get this ball rolling.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk with you.
Yeah, let's talk more about that off camera later.
Because I have another school that's interested with us, okay? And with another history teacher.
For me, I think it's that, and I teach this all the time in history or English, because I'm teaching an English class also this year, that words matter, like language matters.
Yeah.
Pay attention to what people are saying. That word vermin has very clear connotations historically and rhetorically, and he's not using that accidentally or coincidentally.
It's not a dog whistle.
That was planned to use that word. And I think people need to look into what exactly these words that are being used mean, because otherwise you're missing the real meaning.
I definitely agree. I think
So I want to thank you again for coming on. We're doing a Zoom during my prep period. We're about out of time, but thank you. Reach out to us with your thoughts at wigsforwigs@gmail.com. Take care, everybody.